Hello, my name is Pedro Gambaroleva, and today I will explain my dashboards and the insights that I found. First of all, the problem that I found is the carbon footprint that each country generates and that they are not able to fulfill, and we cannot live in this earth with this amount of carbon being generated. So first of all, in the map, we can see that there are countries that generate a lot and some regions that don't. As you can see, South America or Africa don't generate a large carbon footprint. But countries such as the United States, Canada, or Russia, or Australia do generate these high amounts. In order for us to live in this earth with the carbon footprints that they are producing, we can see that countries such as the ones I mentioned generate a lot of carbon footprints. And in order for us to live in this earth with the amount of carbon that they are producing, we would need 3 Earths for the carbon that the European Union produces and 4.26 for the ones of North America. This is a huge number. Also, we can compare it to the GDP that each region generates. As we can see, Africa generates a pretty low carbon footprint due to them having also a pretty low GDP. Let's comparing to the European region. As we can see, most of the countries within the European region generate much more GDP and also maintain a not so high carbon footprint. Maybe countries such as the Middle East tend to use more carbon. They produce more carbon per country, but they are less countries, so they are going to need less Earths in order for us to complete. Either way, we are going to need 2 Earths in order to maintain the carbon production of the Middle East, which is not acceptable. Finally, in the last graph, we can see the ecological footprint generated per region. This means the effort that countries are putting in order to reduce it. North America being the highest one, followed by the European Union, which are the ones that spend the most amount of money in order for them to try to keep their carbon footprint down. And as we can see, they usually tend to have higher GDP per capita. Closing in on this graph, we can see that Africa is not generating a lot of money or is not using much money in order to keep their carbon footprint down. But as we can see, they are not generating as much carbon as other countries, meaning that they don't have to worry about this. Now, continuing with the second dashboard, we can now see the biological deficit or reserves, which Latin America leads, and they have a lot of forests and they are trying to conserve them, followed by Africa. As we said, these countries are not as developed as other ones, meaning that they can afford to do this. Now, the Earth required per HDI, which is going to be the Human Development Index, show us that countries, mainly in the European Union and in the Middle East and Central Asia, tend to have a much bigger carbon footprint in the regions, meaning that not only we can find carbon in their regions, but also if we check in the next step, which is 0.9, we can see that the Human Development Index is super high and the carbon footprint is not as high. So, what can I propose? First of all, we should take into account that countries that are not as highly developed, such as Africa, which are in this region, and Latin America, and some countries in the Middle East and the Asia Pacific, cannot do such big solution as they don't have a human development index. And in the last dashboard, we saw that countries that are highly developed tend to use a lot more carbon and produce a lot more of it. So, what's my proposed solution? First of all, we should start by addressing countries that are developed, but they are not keeping their carbon footprint down. We can say that these countries are found all over the world, but there are some countries which do tend to keep the carbon down. So we could follow what these countries are doing in order for us to maintain the carbon footprint down and try to live in a world where carbon is not such a big problem and the the global warming is much less. We can see that most of these countries are found in the European Union, so we can ask them what are they doing, and also we can try to make them spend more money in order for them to keep their carbon footprint down, such as countries such as North America, so maybe the United States and Canada are going to be our axis in order for us to follow what they are doing. So that was everything I can show. Also, the population might affect, but as you can see, even though the population is not super high in the European Union, they tend to have a larger carbon footprint than other regions. That was everything. Thank you.